U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has called for the protection of civilians as Israel prepares for an expected assault on Gaza. During a meeting with his Saudi counterpart, Prince Faisal bin Farhan, in Riyadh, Blinken said that while Israel has a legitimate right to defend its people, it was, quote, vitally important to protect civilians, and that the U.S. and Saudi Arabia were working together to do so. Blinken also phoned his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi to urge Beijing to use its influence in the Middle East to stop the conflict from spreading. Cinzia Bianco is a visiting fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. I asked her if the normalization talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia could be resurrected or if it was completely off the table.
Definitely can be resurrected, because at the basis of that normalization process, I have to say that, there are very real interests on all the sides involved. The Saudis do want to have stronger relations with Israel and also use this agreement to sort of get a renewal of U.S. security commitments to the region, because Saudi Arabia is aware that to contain the risks emanating from Iran and others, they need both engagement and deterrence. The Israelis obviously have a very strong political interest in signing on to this normalization, because it would unlock a number of other relationships throughout the Arab and Islamic world. And the United States has a strong interest because, first of all, they want to relinquish some of their responsibilities as a security actor in the region to Israel. And at the same time, they also are aware that this would play out very well politically for the administration that would be responsible for facilitating such an agreement. That is simply that those interests are going to stay, but this is really not the time. It's politically toxic to now to look at this file. So it's going to take months, if not more, to be able to revisit that file.
Well, if we can just look at the short-term news now, those hundreds of thousands of Gazans fleeing south, and some of them in danger of, being harmed by the impending Israeli assault. How much influence does Saudi Arabia have in mitigating that, possibly, do you think?
Well, not a lot. If you look at the Israeli side, there's a reason a lot of Israeli commentators, officials, and so on are calling what happened on October 7th our 9/11. And among the reasons is that the Israeli government retaliation or reaction, frankly, does not seem to be very rational at all. And that's exactly what happened with the US government after 9/11. So it would be, the Saudis could possibly entice Netanyahu to restraint were they willing to offer, a continuation of that process of normalization of relations. But it's arguably already too late, because the Arab and Islamic public opinion worldwide is already quite sort of enraged. So it wouldn't allow it. It's already too late for that. And on the Hamas side, Saudi Arabia consider Hamas a terrorist organization. They have dozens of Hamas leaders in their own jails, and they have very limited relations. Arguably, Iran is the one regional player which still has intact leverage on Hamas.
Understood. Thank you for that insight. Cinzia Bianco, visiting fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations.
A sign for every hostage. More than a week after Hamas struck Israel with terror, killing and kidnapping civilians, people have come together here in Tel Aviv. Some are blaming the government. Others came in solidarity with victims' families. Maya Asraf belongs to one of them. The 24-year-old is missing 6 of her own family members.
Gaza and Aviv.
At around 10:30 a.m., terrorists entered their home, dozens of them, armed with knives, waving the knives at them and shouting. I spoke with Doron in the last minute, and she sent me a recording. Mai, there are terrorists here. We are alone. They are shouting.
Doron Katz is her aunt. She was taken together with her small daughters Aviv and Raz. They were visiting family in Niroz, a kibbutz close to Gaza. Ravid Katz, the uncle, is missing too. as is his elderly mother Efrat and her husbad Gad Moshe Moses.
I'm here because my family has no voice right now. They are dead or kidnapped. I'm here to be their voice. I expect from the world the maximum amount of intervention.
She learned what happened through a Hamas TikTok video. Mai tells us her aunt's phone was later located in Gaza. The situation is desperate. Mai's aunt is a German citizen, but in her situation, that doesn't help. It wasn't just Israelis that Hamas killed and kidnapped. 43 different nationalities were represented among their hostages.
As many as 150 people have been abducted and are believed to still being held hostage in Gaza. Their families don't know where they are, how they are doing, and if they're even still alive.
People in Israel are united in the conviction that there needs to be a response. But what exactly this should look like, at least at this protest, isn't clear.
The Israeli government must focus, first of all, on doing whatever is necessary in order to release the hijacked people. Instead of focusing on trying to do some kind of revenge or whatever they are trying to do.
I think the only option we have now, unfortunately, it's to clear Gaza.
So many people in Israel understand that this blood circle is not the solution. It never was, it never will be.
At this point, though, the bloodshed seems like it is far from over.
Let's have a look at some of the other news concerning the conflict. The militant Islamist group Hamas says that 9 more hostages it was holding have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. On Friday, Hamas reported 13 hostage deaths, also blaming the Israeli bombardment. The Israeli government believes up to 150 hostages were taken during the terrorist attack a week ago. Egypt and Israel have agreed to let U.S. citizens leave the Gaza Strip through the Rafah crossing, the only entry point to the territory not controlled by Israel. The Israeli army struck the crossing early this week and says any use of it into Egypt will be in coordination with Israel. Lebanon says it will submit a formal complaint to the UN Security Council over what it calls Israel's deliberate killing of Issam Abdullah, a Lebanese national and Reuters journalist. Abdullah was killed in southern Lebanon on Friday while covering clashes on the border with Israel. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock is in Egypt for talks focused on the Gaza conflict. Baerbock met Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry in Cairo. In a statement, Egypt said both ministers understood the need for, quote, immediate cessation of escalation of the conflict. Baerbock held talks with visiting Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan to discuss joint efforts to secure the release of German hostages.
When the sirens ring, it's time to go. This is a routine Israelis know all too well. For foreigners, that sound is another sign to leave the country while they still can.
Well, at the beginning I wanted to stay here to continue studying, and actually I was feeling safe. But actually last night when the siren was off, I ran into to the shelter, and on the way to the shelter I fell and I scratched myself a bit, and I saw that, okay, I'm not really trained or familiar with this kind of situation, so I decided to take the charter flight.
With most airlines cancelling flights in and out of Israel, many foreigners are depending on repatriation flights to get home. Dozens of countries have set these up after Israel was struck by the deadliest terror attacks in its history. On the other side of Israel's Iron Wall, hundreds of foreign nationals are thought to be trying to escape the besieged territory of Gaza. There's been a glimmer of hope. A US official said Egypt had agreed to open its Rafah border crossing and let foreigners out. Many have gathered at the border, desperate and traumatized. But there's been no movement here yet.
I'm really in fear, and every time I just have to have the thought of me dying in a bomb in Gaza. it's not a good thing. And like every place I go run away, and I just find bombs and I find dead people, and like maybe one day I'll end up like them, but it's a really scary thing for me.
Danger is all around. But all people can do here for now is wait.